My name is Harlan Whitaker. I am 71 years old, and for nearly 50 years I worked as a civil engineer specializing in water infrastructure across the Pacific Northwest. I built things that people rarely notice until they fail. Reservoirs, pipelines, treatment plants that deliver clean water to millions. My hands are scarred and calloused. My back aches every morning, but the systems I designed still stand. My son, Bryce, never understood that kind of legacy. He preferred the kind you can post on social media. The night everything changed began at a sleek downtown Seattle restaurant called Lumiere, the sort of place where the wine list is thicker than most novels and the lighting is designed to make everyone look like they belong on a magazine cover. Bryce had insisted on the venue. He always did. At 34, he was the founder and self-proclaimed visionary behind Aquara Tech, a company promising revolutionary smart water monitoring systems for cities and farms. Investors loved him. Magazines profiled him. His mother, my ex-wife Vanessa, and her new husband, a venture capitalist named Reed Caldwell, beamed at him like he was the second coming. I sat at the end of the table in the same navy blazer I'd worn to every important occasion for 20 years. It was well-made, timeless. Bryce wore a black designer shirt unbuttoned just enough to show the expensive watch on his wrist. His wife, Kendall, scrolled her phone between bites, occasionally laughing at something on the screen. Vanessa kept touching Reed's arm, as if to remind everyone whose side she had chosen 5 years earlier when she left our modest home in Tacoma. The conversation flowed the way it always did lately, like a river engineered to flatter Bryce. He spoke about closing a $20 million Series B round, about the new headquarters they were building, about the prototype sensors that would change how humanity manages its most precious resource. Reed nodded sagely, adding details about the term sheet he had helped negotiate. Vanessa glowed. Kendall murmured affirmations while taking a photo of her entree for her followers. I ate quietly. The salmon tasted like paper. I had attended these dinners before, playing the supporting role of the proud but slightly embarrassing father. Tonight, however, the undercurrent felt sharper. Bryce had been growing bolder in his dismissals of me. Dad still thinks like it's 1995, he'd say with a laugh. Or, some people build bridges. Others build empires. Then came the moment that severed whatever frayed cord still connected us. Bryce stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. Heads turned. A waiter paused mid-stride. Bryce pointed a finger directly at me, his face flushed with wine and triumph. "Look at him," he said, voice carrying across the room. 71 years old and still driving that same 10-year-old Subaru, living in the same boring house. "You really are a loser, Dad. I feel ashamed carrying your name sometimes." The words landed like hammer blows. 40 years crawling through mud and blueprints for pennies, and you call that a life? I've spent years trying to keep you away from my circle. Reed is the kind of man who actually gets it. I wish he'd been my father instead. Kendall giggled. Vanessa looked down at her plate, saying nothing. Reed raised his glass in a mock toast, a small smile playing on his lips. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Strangers offered me the pitying glances reserved for old men who have overstayed their welcome. I felt the heat rise in my face, but not from anger. From something colder. Clarity. Bryce sat down, satisfied. The conversation resumed, as if he had merely commented on the weather. I placed my fork beside my plate, folded my napkin neatly, and stood. No dramatic speech. No scene. I simply looked at each of them, my son, his wife, his mother, the man who had replaced me, and walked out into the cool Seattle night. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a soft, final thud. That I didn't drive home immediately. I walked the waterfront for an hour, letting the salt air clear my head. In the distance, the lights of the city reflected on Puget Sound, and I thought about all the pipelines and pumps I had designed that made this glittering metropolis possible. Invisible work. Essential work. Bryce had no idea how much of his own glittering success rested on similar invisible foundations. Because every dollar in Aquara Tech, every patent, every sleek office, every luxury lease had come from me. I had never intended to deceive him. When Bryce dropped out of college at 22 with a half-formed idea for water sensors, I saw both promise and recklessness. Handing him cash outright would have destroyed him. So I did what engineers do. I designed a system. I created anonymous investment vehicles through old colleagues and trusted attorneys. I funneled nearly $4 million of my life savings and retirement into shell companies that appeared as visionary early-stage funds. I bought the building where his headquarters now sat. I arranged the introductions that landed his first major municipal contract. I even reviewed his early technical designs under the guise of consulting through a third party, correcting fatal flaws before they reached investors. Bryce believed he had charmed the world with his charisma and vision. He had no idea the world had been gently guided by his father's hidden hand. When I finally reached my house in Tacoma, an unpretentious craftsman, I had restored myself over decades. I sat in my study, surrounded by blueprints and old photographs. One picture showed Bryce at age 8, wearing a child-sized hard hat on a job site, grinning up at me as I explained how pressure valves worked. Where had that boy gone? The one who asked questions instead of delivering verdicts. I opened my laptop and sent a single encrypted email to my attorney, Miriam Delgado. Subject line: begin the foundation protocol. No pleasantries. She would know what it meant. We had prepared the documents years ago, hoping they would gather dust forever. The next morning, Miriam met me in her office overlooking the harbor. She poured me black coffee and listened as I recounted the dinner. Her expression remained professional, but her eyes showed quiet sorrow. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," I replied. "Not destruction. Deconstruction. Controlled. Educational." We reviewed the architecture of Bryce's empire. Acoratech was 62% owned by a Delaware LLC that traced back to me. The headquarters building was leased through a property trust one controlled. The fleet of company cars, including Bryce's prized Tesla Model X Plaid, fell under a fleet management contract with termination clauses tied to employment status. Even the intellectual property licenses had subtle reversion triggers. It was all legal, all airtight, and all invisible until it wasn't. We agreed on the timeline. A measured descent. Monday, the car. Tuesday, corporate accounts and key contracts. Wednesday, the building. Each loss delivered with precise documentation so Bryce would understand the ground shifting beneath him. That weekend, while Bryce and Kendall posted photos from a vineyard getaway, I tended my small garden. I pruned roses with steady hands. Patience, I reminded myself, is what separates good engineering from catastrophe. Monday arrived bright and clear. I pictured the scene as I drank my morning coffee on the porch. Bryce would stride into the parking garage in his tailored suit, earbuds in, already barking orders into his phone. Instead, he found a tow truck positioned beside his Tesla. The driver, polite but firm, presented the termination notice. Bryce's protests echoed off concrete walls. He called the leasing company, his voice rising. The representative confirmed the owner had exercised its right to reclaim the vehicle due to material changes in the lessee's status. Bryce watched his symbol of success winched onto the flatbed, wheels dangling helplessly. He posted a vague story about supply chain issues later that day. His followers offered sympathy. Tuesday brought the real tremor. Bryce arrived at the office late, having taken an Uber and attempted to buy coffee for his leadership team using the corporate card. Declined. Then another card. Declined. Whispers spread through the open plan office. By noon, payroll systems locked. Key municipal contracts showed sudden compliance flags that required immediate attention. Flags triggered by my quiet instructions to partners. Reed's advisory fees, which flowed through Acora as a major line item, were suspended pending review. Bryce spent the day in frantic calls, his usual swagger cracking. I received a voicemail that evening. His voice was strained but still edged with arrogance. "Dad, something weird is happening with the accounts. Probably some banking glitch. Can you wire me 20 grand to tide things over? I'll pay you back." I did not reply. Wednesday was the structural failure. Eviction notices were served at the headquarters. The property trust had exercised its termination rights under the lease agreement. Employees were given 48 hours to vacate. Bryce stood in the lobby watching movers haul out furniture while Kendall cried beside him. His technical co-founder pulled him aside, revealing that several core patents were now under legal review for licensing disputes. The house of cards was collapsing exactly as engineered. Bryce showed up at my door that night, unannounced. His eyes were wild, his designer shirt wrinkled. Kendall waited in the car, staring at her phone. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, pushing past me into the living room. I offered him a seat. He refused. I remained calm, the way I had on 1,000 job sites when things went wrong. "I did nothing you didn't invite, son. You built your life on foundations you never examined. Now you're feeling their absence." He laughed bitterly. "You? You're telling me you, somehow, sabotage my company? Bullshit. You don't have that kind of money or connections." I walked to my desk and handed him a folder. Inside were summaries, ownership structures, funding trails, lease agreements. Not everything, but enough to crack the illusion. Bryce flipped through the pages, his face draining of color. You set this all up? "I gave you the opportunity to build something real," I said. "You chose the performance instead. I funded the performance. Now the performance is over." He sank onto the couch, the fight draining from him. For the first time in years, I saw the boy beneath the bluster. "Why? Why now?" "Because you looked me in the eye and called me a loser in front of strangers. Because your mother said nothing. Because you genuinely believed you did it all yourself." I realized I had helped create a man who despised the very qualities that made his success possible. Patience, quiet competence, long-term thinking. Tears welled in his eyes, though he tried to hide them. "I didn't know. I thought. Reed said you were holding me back, that I needed to cut the cord." "Reed benefited from the same invisible hand," I replied. "His advisory fees were generous because I approved them." The silence stretched. Outside, rain began pattering against the windows, the soft Pacific Northwest rain that fills the reservoirs I once designed. "What happens now?" Bryce whispered. "That depends on you. The company isn't dead. It's wounded. You still own 20%. The patents can be renegotiated. The building can be released under new terms." "Because destruction is easy," I told him. "Any fool can swing a sledgehammer. It takes an engineer to know which supports to remove so the building can be saved and strengthened." I didn't want to destroy my son. I wanted to give him the chance to become someone worth being proud of. He nodded slowly. "I was an asshole. You were lost," I corrected. "There's a difference." We sat in companionable silence as the sun set, painting the sound in oranges and purples. Somewhere beneath the city, the water systems I had designed continued their quiet, essential work, unseen, uncelebrated, but holding everything together. I am 71 years old. I have scars on my hands and aches in my joints. But for the first time in a long while, I look at my son and see not an empire built on lies, but the beginnings of a man built on truth. That, I think, is the greatest infrastructure project of my life.